thank you for joining us today. We're really excited because it's the first of our video podcasts for SKB Law. My name is Khan-Bashir. I'm a solicitor and the founder of SKB Law. So we're going to be speaking to lots of different people from our communities that work in and around the communities with some amazing jobs, doing some amazing work. And today we are really delighted to welcome Ayesha Bhatti, a therapist, to sit with us and talk to us about her job and her role and her life, actually. So Ayesha, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We're absolutely really excited that you've joined us today for our first audio and video podcast. So Ayesha, before we get into the real nuts and bolts of therapy, tell me a little bit about your journey into therapy and how you came to be a therapist.
I think my journey started about 9 years ago. From my own experience, really having therapy myself. There were a few years where in my family there was lots of loss, lots of personal tragedies, and it was consecutive. It was one after the other. And I'm the eldest of 8 siblings, so I've always had that role of support and being there for everyone else. And I didn't realise the impact that the loss and the trauma was having on myself. And it kind of developed into depression and anxiety, and I didn't recognise any of it because I just got to a point where there was, I was developing my own kind of coping mechanisms that weren't always healthy. And then it got to a point where my anxiety got bad and I was struggling at work. No one could see this, but I could. And I think what happened was a close friend said, I think you should try therapy. And I was like, you don't do therapy, and it's all because in our culture, you turn to, it's always, turn to God, pray, have that faith, that kind of strong spiritual aspect. And I thought therapy was mamby-pamby. I'm not doing that.
That's the normal reaction.
Actually, and it was mine.
Therapy,
yeah, absolutely, and it was also mine. But it was getting difficult to manage. Depression can be really isolating and lonely. And I had everyone around me. I've got a big, wonderful family, and I've got a really strong network of friends. But when you're in that, it's really isolating and it's very lonely. So a friend of mine offered to get me some therapy. Introduced me to a therapist, and I had a consultation, and then we took it from there, and I started having therapy. And I had preconceived ideas, and I was like, this is not going to work. But and also there was I thought, she's not going to understand me culturally.
So I'm assuming then it wasn't somebody from your culture.
No, because the friend who had introduced me to this therapist was from a middle class background, white, ill-clear. So the therapist was also from that similar background. So I was a bit skeptical, very skeptical actually. But I know I needed to do something, otherwise it wasn't going in a good direction. My mental health, you just being able to function, managing work. So I knew something had to happen. So at that point I was willing to try anything. And I was so lucky that I had supportive friends that would they were willing to help me do this, and found the therapist, which a lot of people don't have that luxury. So I went to therapy on the first day, and she asked me what I'd come for, and I told her what had happened and how I'd been reacting to it, and she just looked at me and she said, "How else did you think you were going to react to it? Do you know what you've gone through?" And just that validation and that person seeing me, I can't tell you how powerful that was. And I was just blown back. The rest of the hour I did spend crying and, just tears and just crying, just because I felt seen and heard. And, and don't get me wrong, I've got a lovely family, lovely friends, but you feel like you're a burden on them. You can't
If you open up and tell them what you're feeling.
Right. You know, and sometimes you feel, especially in our community, you feel like you're letting everyone down. You're saying things that are usually hidden and should stay in the family, or you know, you don't want to kind of embarrass anyone or embarrass yourself. But this person was offering, you know, unconditional support, no judgment, totally congruent. You know, so absolutely seeing it from my perspective, really with me in that room, was just holding that space for me. And it was so powerful. And you know, I spent probably 1.5 years in therapy, but it changed my life. Just that person seeing me and validating me and understanding me and helping me to accept why I was doing them things and why I was feeling the way I was, because I felt guilt and shame and upset. I was like, why am I feeling so low? Why can't I just get up? Why can't I just do this? And I felt like I was letting my family down and my friends down. But that person let me understand why this was happening, and that actually it was okay.
Yeah, it feel like that.
Yeah. You know, and it was just, honestly, it was literally a bigger than a light bulb moment.
You know? Imagine if you've been holding on to it for so long. I'm the eldest child too, so I can imagine, sort of can relate to some of the things you're saying, that you have this sense of responsibility, and if you show a crack of how you're feeling, then you are, you know, not carrying through that responsibility, I suppose.
Absolutely.
So that must have been a complete, like, opening up of all your emotions and sort of feelings that you've been building up for quite some time.
Yeah, it really was. It was such a relief and such a unburdening of what I was holding, and it was getting heavy. You know, and it was getting heavy, but she gave me permission to just let it go and to hand it over and just to look at it from a different perspective. And, you know, with depression and things like that, you can lose your identity, your self-worth, your self-value, your self-esteem, and all those things were quite low with me. They'd got quite low. And she helped to build that back up. She helped me to look at my inner resources, my inner resilience, what I meant to family, what I meant to my friends, you know, what I meant to myself, you know, which I'd lost in all the kind of trauma. You know, bereavement is trauma, and not letting myself feel that and thinking, no, I need to look after mum, I need to look after dad, I need to be there for everyone, and, you know, functioning on empty. You know, those resources had kind of depleted. You know.
So was that like a turning point then for you in your life? In that, what was it that? I mean, obviously you've explained the whole benefit to you in terms of, you know, bearing your, you know, soul, as it were. This is me, and this is what I'm feeling, and this is what I'm going through. What made Ayesha then say, I need to help others with a similar situation?
So I've always been in roles where I've always helped other people. I've always enjoyed supporting vulnerable people. So the real kind of pivotal turning point for me was during COVID. My auntie passed away in COVID. It was unexpected. And I spent 2 days in hospital with her. And it was end of care, so we were, you know, me and one of my siblings, we were allowed to go in and just be with her, and so we'd sit there and we'd pray and, you know, hoping for a miracle really, but we were told, and it was quite a traumatic time because what she'd gone in for was a simple thing, but she'd ended up getting quite ill, being on a ventilator, ending up with brain damage. So things that probably shouldn't have happened, and were really unexpected, and it ended up quite tragically for her. But watching that was really difficult and quite traumatic. And then, you know, trying to kind of navigate work after that and not a normal life was really difficult, especially when there was support lacking at work. So I wasn't getting the support at work. It was a difficult time. And what it made me realise was that I need to look after myself, because I was having flashbacks of her dying. I was, you know, having sleepless nights, and I didn't realise it was what it was. You know, it was PTSD, and I didn't realise. I only realised later on.
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes. So I only realised later on, because when you're in it, it's so hard to identify. And you know, it's not just me that's in bereavement. It's my whole family, and then it's my mum's sister. So I'm trying to support my mum, and my mum doesn't want to talk about it because my mum's from that era of we we're going to pray. We're going to we don't need to talk about this. So it was so difficult to have them conversations and say, I felt like this, I felt like that. This was really difficult. While I was in the hospital, I saw this and I felt this, and it was kind of, I'd come home and that's it.
Yeah, it's kind of shut out or shut down, isn't it? And the phrase that I always hear is Allah di marzi, which means that's God's will, which it is. But that seems to be like a shutdown of, right, whatever happens, you have to accept it.
Yeah.
But the process of going through, I suppose, that trauma, mainly people on the outside see it because you're still trying to deal with it. You know, I don't know, you probably know better than me, but from people that I know who have been through something similar, they don't recognise that they are going through that PTSD.
Yeah.
It's others that will say, you know what, this is how you look like you're going through this.
Yeah,
that's the case. Yeah,
absolutely. And I didn't see it in myself because I was just trying to function.
Yeah.
And I thought I was doing okay. It was other people that recognised it, people that were close to me, like not sleeping, not having any sleep. So that can really affect your mood and your mental health. And then not being able to eat properly and having flashbacks, having nightmares. So other people noticed it because, you know, my mood was different. I was more kind of on edge, and concentration levels at work were it was hard. And then when you're not getting the support at work, you're faking it to make it, aren't you? You're like, I'm fine, I'm absolutely fine, I can do this. So
it presses it even more, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And you know, so you kind of try and function. And I think when I realised that I needed the support was when work weren't supportive, and I thought, right, and I left. It was a really difficult decision. I didn't have a job to go to.
Leap of faith then.
But having a friend who already had an established practice, and I remember talking to her and saying, you know, I want to do more, I want to help people. And she was so supportive, and she said, look for a course, do it again. And I was like, you know, after studying and you know, doing a degree and doing a master's, I thought I'd put all that behind me because it was hard. You know, it was a difficult time to get through that, and I enjoyed it. But I thought, I'll put my studying there behind me now. I'm not doing that again. And she was like, look, what are you going to lose within? You could do it in a year or two, you know. And I thought, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So we looked for courses and things that I could do while I'm working, and I started it. And I remember volunteering. It was a day or two in, and the tutor was an absolutely amazing woman. She asked for a volunteer, and I thought, okay, it's a good few months now after the bereavement, maybe coming into a year actually. And I thought, I'm doing well now. You know, I've left work. I'm working for someone else. I'm enjoying it. I've started this course. I know what I'm doing, and you know, I weren't feeling as intense. I thought, I'm good. So she asked for a volunteer so she could
demonstrate a technique or something.
Absolutely,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So nobody else was. I'm quite a shy person. I
can see where this is going.
Yeah.
I can.
I'm quite a shy person, so I didn't offer, but no one else was offering.
Right.
And I thought, and it was good 5 minutes, and she kept saying, "Come on, guys, come on." And I just thought, I need to break out my shell a bit.
Okay.
I always sit at the back and I'm really, really quiet.
Yeah.
That's just who I am. So I was like, oh, okay. And I put my hand up. I thought, I'm pretty strong.
Okay.
I'm in a good position. You know, she can do the demo on me. So I finally, reluctantly, I put my hand up and we sat at the front. She called me to the front, sat at the front, in a similar setting as we are.
Okay.
So there was about 15 of my classmates sat there watching. And she started off by asking me, you know, so what brings you to therapy? And I just said, you know, I think I just wanted to talk about, you know, trying to manage the workload, because there was quite a heavy workload with my other work, and I'm not sleeping really well, and so it can be a bit much. And so she started to unpick it. She's like, do you want to tell me a bit more about, you know, what is it around the sleep? What do you think that's about? Or why are you not sleeping well? And I was like, well, I think few months ago this happened, and I think since then I've got into it. Oh, okay, so that's quite big. So she started to unpick it, and how did that make you feel? And and I was like, well,
real life therapy session. Then.
Yeah, and and then it got to my auntie, and she said, oh, that must have been quite a difficult time for you. And then all of a sudden, when that kind of triggered memories and stuff, and I got a lump in my throat, and she said, how are you feeling at the moment? I said, I'm finding it difficult actually, if I'm honest, but I'm managing. I think I'm managing pretty well. And she said, what does managing pretty well look like? So she asked some really
searching questions.
Yeah, and I said, well, I'm doing okay, and I think that I'm processing it. And she said, okay, so you're processing it. Okay, so tell me a bit more about that. And then we got on to me feeling guilty about what happened with my auntie, and not being able to kind of go further with unpicking it, investigating what happened at the hospital and things like that, because my mum wanted to just close it. She wanted closure, and she wanted to put my auntie to rest, and so it was a really difficult time, and I had a lot of guilt about maybe I should have done more. Could I have done more? So I was holding that guilt, and I didn't realise it until she asked me about that. And that was linked to me not sleeping and having the flashbacks. And then she just said, okay, if you could have done anything different to save your auntie, what would you have done? And I just sat there, and tears pouring, and I just sat there, and I looked at her, and we sat in silence. She let me think. She didn't break that moment, and it was really powerful. And I came to the realization that there was nothing I could have done. I did everything I could. There's nothing. Me or my other sibling who was there as well, there was nothing that we could have done. But just her validating that and giving me that option and giving me the space to feel that.
And taking control of hers again.
And that's the question. She asked me what I could have done, and I never had an alternative view of it. Because like I said, it's hard to talk about it at home, because my mum just can't talk about it. My dad's a very spiritual man, and my dad was, he's like, and I was like, Dad, I can't believe this has happened. I remember when it happened, and he was there at the hospital. He couldn't come in, but he was there waiting. And he said, Allah be mercy, it's in God's hands. And I do believe it's in God's hands, spiritually and religiously, absolutely. But, how do we process that from that?
Absolutely. As humans, how do we process it? Of course, we believe that there's obviously the creator and everything happens without his will.
Absolutely.
But in normal day-to-day, we do need to, process how we're feeling as human beings, I suppose. So then you moved into the world. What kind of work did you do prior to becoming a therapist, or did you go straight into the world of therapy?
So I've always worked, like I said, I've worked in communities. I've worked within drug and alcohol services for the last, let's say, 10 years or maybe more. And again, always using them therapeutic skills, holding the space, making sure that people, regardless of what background, what they're going through, that they've got a space to be, accepted, to feel valued, validated and seen. Some of the people I've worked with within drug and alcohol services are really vulnerable and marginalised and disaffected and shunned by the rest of the community, because they're seen as addicts, they're seen as part of society that are
just
not
get
accepted.
Disregarded.
Absolutely. Whereas within my role and the job that I've had, we see beyond that. We get to see the person and why that person has ended up in the situation that they're in now. Why is that person using drugs? What is behind that? Who is that person? So we see the person as a whole, not just what the symptoms, not just what they present with. And so you realise from that, actually, you shouldn't judge, because it could be anyone walking through that door. My brother, my sister, my best friend. We're all one bad move away from being homeless or using drugs.
That's very true, very true. I think we don't realise that in other people sometimes. And so is that the appeal for you about therapy? I mean, given what you've told me about how you came to become a therapist, is the appeal and the thing that keeps you in it? You're obviously a very caring person. You can see that from, you've explained you're the eldest child. There's a lot of responsibility, a lot of caregiving to members of your family. So it does seem like a role that you're naturally good at. And we talked about this earlier, didn't we? That if you are naturally good at something and you end up doing it as a job, you don't actually see it as work. You see it as like, this is what I'm here for, it's my purpose. And I talk a lot about people's purpose and why we are actually on this earth. But is the appeal that where other people wouldn't recognise the person, if somebody is going through difficulties, whether it's anxiety, alcohol related, drug related, that you're able to get to the core of that person and then help them, and for them to come out to some kind of stage where they're then able to help themselves. Is that the appeal?
Absolutely, I think that's it. I think believing that people can change, and believing that people can make those changes when you create an environment for change, when you create an environment for trust, care, change, valuing that person's background, what they've been through, and helping them turn that into a resource, and helping them see whatever tragedy, whatever trauma they've been through, though that's a resource, and how can they change that? How can they see that and move through it? And I think because I've seen that happen, and I know that it can happen, and I know that change can happen, I really value helping people make them changes. And someone did it for me. Someone saw that in me, and it really changed my life.
So when you say to your clients, I know how you're feeling, I don't know if that's a therapy question, but I'm just saying that you can relate to them. They know that you actually have been truthful about that because of what you've been through. And I suppose that makes your therapy more powerful. I don't know if all therapists have been through some kind of trauma that has helped them through therapy, but definitely with you I can see that that's the, I suppose I'm trying to say that the therapy that you explore and give is through your own experience as well, what you've been through, and it's going to be so much more, I think, relatable. And I think one of the biggest things that you said is about the being non-judgmental about people, and we've got lots to talk about, I think, but I think in terms of our community as a whole, there's a lot of that goes on. So if you're talking about the layers of trauma, anxiety, depression, this whole judgment thing as well, it really squashes the rest down, doesn't it? Who needs therapy, Ayesha? Who would you say? I know it's a big question, that, but for anyone listening out there, who would need therapy?
I think therapy is for everyone, really. I think there's no limits, there's no boundaries to therapy. But I think if you're struggling, if there's you're finding yourself stuck, you're finding yourself unable to recognise who you are, and life is becoming difficult because of what you've been through, because of your experiences. There's so many different aspects to therapy, but I think I try and move away from putting therapy in a box. I think what we should move towards is normalising therapy. Therapy should be part of everyone's everyday life. Like we go for a spa, that we look forward to doing nice things for ourselves. It should be built into well-being. It should be, I'm having a therapy session, and it shouldn't be, what's wrong? Why? Is everything okay? It should be, that's really good. Yeah, I'm thinking of doing that. It should be something that's, normalised within work, within our culture, within society as a whole, I think.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, because through my work with the clients, with the work we do, one of the main things that stands out for me is the lack of communication within people, within families, within a social circle. If someone's said or done something, then it's not explored, it's not communicated as to why, how, all of that. It's just a judgment's made and people are shut out, or people don't talk. So I definitely think, and that's why I asked you the question, who needs therapy? Because I also would like to see people who are just not at the worst case scenario, but people who are just, in everyday life feeling, concerns or have issues, to talk about it and talk it out, to normalise it, like you say. Yeah. You sort of answered my next question, which was, why do we need therapy? And I've sort of mentioned the communication bit, but is there any other reasons you think we would need therapy?
I think therapy is important to not feel isolated and alone. I think that kind of gives you a space to be able to have your, to have your feelings open, to be seen, to be accepted by someone who's not going to judge, by someone who's going to endeavour to create a relationship built on trust and empathy and compassion and congruence. So I think that's the most important thing, just having that space where you can just come there, be yourself, and go through, look at what it is that you want to work on, what's going on in your life. But having that space is so important. And that's really hard sometimes, especially coming from a community where things are not accepted, certain things are taboo. You end up living in guilt and shame, and that kind of stops you from developing. It stops you from being, open and honest. You can't do any work in guilt and shame. And that can, especially like in situations where you will know when there's divorce happen, in our culture there's a tendency to blame a certain party, or to blame you, or to blame you as a mother or a partner or a father. That stops you from getting help. That stops you from feeling like you're doing the right thing, or feeling like you've got a right to not be in a situation that's harmful and detrimental to you. And I think we need to encourage people to move out of that guilt and shame, and to access support, and to reach out and normalise getting support, especially in talking therapies. We'll all get medication, won't we? If we're depressed, we'll go to our doctor and they'll offer us, antidepressants, or if you're a diabetic, they'll say,
very
here.
quickly as well,
Absolutely. Here's some medication, here's your insulin. And we're very accepting of that if it's a physical thing. But what we need to be is more accepting of our well-being, our mental health, and noticing when it's not right. Being okay with saying, I'm not feeling okay. And I want to get support for that.
So I want to explore that a little bit more about accessing therapy. And in your experience, are there in some communities therapy is more taboo than others? Is it seen as a weakness? Is it seen as a log kya kenge? What would people say if they find out that you're going to a therapist? Is it going to ruin your marriage prospect? How have you found, in your experience, that's been dealt with?
I think it's still very much kind of a closed conversation. It is opening up more because there's a lot of
that's good.
There's a lot of services out there now that are directed at ethnic communities, BME. They're using like Urdu and Punjabi to get people in, but it's still very limited. And this, even though the services are there, if there's a culture of no, we don't talk about this. You don't. There's a really great saying, and I can't translate it, but it actually means don't uncover the cloth of your own belly. You might know it, so don't expose yourself.
No, you mean don't expose yourself.
So don't, why are you going to like...
It's like don't air your dirty laundry.
Exactly. Exactly. My mum says it, and it's really funny, but I don't think I could do it justice. But it's basically saying that, like, why are you going to air your dirty laundry, And that's still really prevalent in our community. And I find that a lot, even with friends when I'm talking about therapy, and they know that I do it as a job, but because of how they're brought up, how they socialise, it's still like, oh no, I'd never get there. I'd never get there. No, I'm not talking to anyone.
We get that ourselves because obviously, we try and provide a holistic service so we can do the legal fixes and, this is the solution legally. But if we recognise that the client is obviously struggling with the concept of separation or divorce or not seeing their children, then we will signpost them. But we get that reaction.
Yeah.
No, I don't need it. No, it's like,
Yeah.
especially young men, you know, it's seen as, well, it makes me look weak, you know,
Yeah.
and in our community, there's no such thing as needing therapy in some parts. It's like, you need to man up, or
Yeah.
you need to get on with it. What do you mean? And I've seen that a lot, and that's leading me to my next question, that in young people in particular, especially those that were, you know, going through COVID at some of their sort of pertinent years, I have a lot of parents that say to me that there is a communication issue with our youngsters. We can't get through to them. They're not speaking to us, but they're obviously going through something. Is that something you've seen more of?
I did, and I have seen more of it, especially in COVID. I was working, just after COVID, I was working in schools with young people, and it was based around substance misuse. So going into schools, working one-to-one with young people that were using drugs, and the behaviour was becoming quite concerning. And there were lots of young people from South Asian communities, and a lot of it was self-medicating. It was because they were struggling through COVID, they were isolated, they didn't have that means of communication, there was a lack of understanding on their parents' part, generationally not understanding what anxiety is, what isolation is.
The parents have been brought up with the values that maybe their parents came with from South Asia, and they're trying to fit those into how young people today are living. And I think it's not fitting, is it?
It's not fixing, no, and it's not fitting at all, because there's this pull, there's this kind of fear from parents who have got quite a traditional approach, that, you know, if they let their kids go out, if they let the kids kind of do this and that, they're going to lose them, or they're going to lose, the child's going to lose their cultural values, their Islamic values, you know. So, but there's no communication, and that's the problem. But, you know, and I feel sorry for the parents as well, because they've not been taught how to communicate. They've not been taught what questions to ask. They've just done what they know is best.
And how they were brought up.
Absolutely. So there's a big step missing from how to communicate. And I see that because I'd see the parents as well. I had one mum couldn't speak English, and she just cried in Punjabi to me because her son was just out all the time, living in quite a challenging and scary area of Leeds. And he was getting involved in, you know, drugs and things like that, and she was on her own. Her husband had passed away in COVID, but he was saying to me when I spoke to him that my mum doesn't understand, she doesn't get it, you know, I can't talk to her. And it was so sad seeing that, because all she wanted was the best for him, but she was, you know, indirectly kind of suffocating him and pushing him away more, and it was pushing him towards, you know, people on the street that were getting into drug deal, getting him to run. He was only a young lad, 14, and his schooling were going down. So I'd got called in through school, but ended up at his house talking to mum because mum were worried. And because I could speak the languages, I thought, right, I'm the best person to do this. And she wanted to know, what is that drug? What is it that he's using? Why is he not my child anymore? Why has he changed? And so it was, you know, it was that giving her that understanding, that education, and just trying to make her understand what he's going through. You know, that actually he lost a parent too. You know, and this is his behaviour manifesting because he's had trauma and he's had loss.
So interesting,
But they couldn't talk about each other's trauma and loss.
I see that a lot. So you're sort of effectively opening up those channels of communication. And one of my questions to you was going to be, therapy people traditionally see as one-to-one, like as we're sitting here today, but you've just sort of alluded to a different kind of therapy where you actually get involved with the families as well. So like family therapy, I suppose. Is that quite successful? Does that work?
It can be successul. Within therapy, you've got to remember that you can't force anything on anyone. You know, people want to have to make changes, and when they're ready to make them changes or ready to get support, it makes the process easier because they've already opened that door. So you're just there, you're in the house now, so you're there, and those rooms are available. You're just a guide, you're directing them now into these different rooms of what's there, what they can explore. And that's how I see myself, that they're a full house. They've got the rooms, and those rooms are full of knowledge and resources and experience. You know, regardless of what your background is, you've always come with experience. You know, you've got something in there, the resources. Sometimes they can't see them resources because of the trauma, because of the pain, because of the unhealthy coping mechanisms. And my job is to effectively guide them into that house and take them into each room, you know, and show them what's there and how to access that.
That's brilliant. I love that concept. So they actually have got the tools themselves.
Absolutely.
They just don't know they're there.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
And they get buried in self-defeating behaviour, trauma, sadness, bereavement. It gets buried, doesn't it? You can't see it. You can't see what's in front of you. So you just need someone to guide you. And you know, sometimes when I have clients and they'll say, "Thank you so much," and I'll say, "Thank you," because you've done the work. You're the one that's done the work. You've done the hard work. You know, it's painful. Sometimes it can be really difficult unlocking that stuff, having to see that stuff, having to recognise your behaviour, which is not always pretty, you know. We develop unhealthy coping mechanisms to defend ourselves and protect ourselves. And to unpick that is really brave, you know, for someone to even take the step of coming to therapy is really brave.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, though I do believe them resources are within.
Yeah, it seems that you are handing back to them sort of the tools and the resources, like you say, to take back some control of their life and make some decisions that might then help them going forward. I think it's just the way you seem to guide people through it is just fantastic, you know. And I want to talk about a topic relating to that, but early on in my career, I used to see a lot of clients who obviously needed some help, because divorce is like a big trauma in people's lives. But I often saw a reoccurring theme, particularly in our South Asian community, in that if somebody was going through something, then there would be obviously, as you alluded to earlier, that religion is something that you can call upon, and absolutely, but as humans we might require something more. But I tend to hear stories where people who need help, therapeutic help, are then told to go see a peer, which is like a religious man, and he'll say some prayers on you and you'll all be fine again. Or, oh, somebody's done black magic. I hear this a lot. Oh, you're going through this because someone's put nazar on you, which is the evil eye, or they've cast a spell, and so or you've got a jinn, which is a spirit that's possessed you. And it's often such a shame to see that when these people needed help, that help was bypassed for all these other kind of concepts, and often made worse. Have you come across anything like that in your experience?
Yeah, lots of times, especially in addiction, when I've had families from South Asian backgrounds come with their young people or children for support. They struggle to understand that what's behind the addiction. The first thing I think it was one of the first families I met. The father said to me, "We think it's jinn. We think it's jinn." Yeah, because he was experiencing psychosis from his drug use.
Oh, right.
So he was hearing voices. He had complex mental health going on. But the parents, through a lack of education and a lack of understanding, and also through what they know of jinn and black magic and things like that, they were adamant that it was jinn, and he was hearing jinn. These voices were jinn. He'd been possessed. His behaviour's changed. This is not our son. He's been possessed. Someone's done black magic on him. So what that did, it took away from us being able to do any interventions. Because we were trying to fight with the family to say, actually, we respect that, and obviously I do believe in things like that, but then it's not always the answer. Especially when someone's using drugs and there's certain symptoms, and there's things that we're aware of from our knowledge base and experience of addiction, that actually this is psychosis from brought on from this particular drug use. So it's very difficult to get the parents to understand that. and to acknowledge that, because they were adamant that it was...
They had their beliefs.
Yeah. So it was about working together and not shutting their beliefs down.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And not isolating them and making them feel outside of the process, but actually bringing them in on it and saying, look, your beliefs, they're valid to some extent, but actually this could be happening at the same time, and we think we can help in this way, and you know there's nothing to lose by you letting us support in this way. So it's always about trying to work together holistically, because that person still has to go back to their family.
Absolutely.
You know, so how can we do this holistically? Because the families are obviously concerned. They're concerned about you know, their child's well-being. There's a massive toll on them as family, watching this person go through addiction and see them go through behaviours that are unrecognisable and you know, really difficult to see as a family. So
I'm a massive fan of that collaborative approach, because not only as a therapist you recognise that all the other factors, it's not just this individual, but you recognise, as like you said, they have to go back to that family. You know, the feelings of the family, although they may not be the reason the person is feeling the way are still valid in some respects, and you respect that. And I think that the beauty of you being from the community, if you have clients from the South Asian community, is that you get the nuances as well. And, you know, I think therapy and therapists as a whole do a fantastic job. So not to take back from anyone who isn't from that community as a whole, they do sterling work. But I think the fact that you are from that community, there's certain things that they know that you will get. And they don't have to explain, and they don't feel that this person won't understand what we're talking about. If we are talking about jinns or being possessed or black magic and all of that, it's not too far a stretch for you to think, well, I understand why you feel that way, or somebody's told you that this might be the case. So bringing all that together like you do, I think is just such an amazing approach, and you know, gently then helping the family to unpick and use their resources. I'm using all your buzzwords now because they all work, you know, in terms of helping families through this. So if I bring you back to the work that we do, and one of the reasons why I wanted this conversation with you, how can you, Ayesha, as a therapist, help somebody who might be going through separation or divorce, which is, you know, according to Fact Finder, is one of the top 5 big stresses in your life that you can go through, like death and moving house and heart attacks and things like that. How could you help somebody who's having all sorts of feelings about their relationship or marriage ending? Because us as lawyers have to deal with the sort of the legal framework and signpost them to, this is a legal remedy, this is how we can do it in court, this is what we will do for you to make sure that you get justice, whatever it is. But we are very conscious that these clients are going through some huge emotional turmoil as well. How can coming to you for therapy help someone going through that situation?
I think firstly, as a therapist, when someone's going through that, you do recognise that it's a massive change. And then there's lots of kind of there's difficulties with that, isn't there? And having acceptance of the decision they've made can be really conflicting. And I think first and foremost is getting that person to have acceptance around their decisions and, you know, accept who they are, why they've got to that decision, and help them just be comfortable, you know, and feel comfortable with their decisions and what they're going through. And being, you know, helping them feel aligned with what they're going through and why they're doing what they're doing, you know, just accepting them for who they are. Because sometimes when you're going through things like that, you lose confidence, you lose self-esteem, you know, you lose self-validation, because, you know, something's breaking. You know, there's a whole big there's a whole big relationship
placed around marriage, isn't it? I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, because it's just, I just feel that there is so much importance around a marriage being successful, in that sometimes it's warts and all, even if it's at breaking point, even if you are completely unhappy, then have a child. That'll solve the world's problems. You know, I just find that in some households that even if someone is going through something, whatever trauma, depression they have got going through in their lives, then marriage will be the be all and end all. It's held in such esteem. It's like a fix. It's like paracetamol if you've got a headache. Get married. That'll solve all your problems. It'll solve drug addiction. It'll solve. I've seen it all. Yeah,
it'll solve world poverty. It'll solve everything.
Honestly, and
I know.
So then, when that is coming to an end, or there's cracks in it, I feel that there's a bit more pressure on people to say this was supposed to be the fix to make my life better.
Absolutely, and especially for us coming from our communities, because our communities are cohesive and big.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just, you know, mum, dad and children. You know, there's aunties, there's uncles, there's mum, dad, there's such a big dynamic involved. So when that marriage breaks down, you're not just trying to deal with yourself and your own emotions and that of your partners. You're actually dealing with the family, the community, what they're going to say, what they're going to think, and that pressure to manage everyone else's expectations and not be able to manage your own, that can cause a lot of internal conflict, you know, a lot of feelings of, you know, are my decisions validated? Am I wrong? Is there something wrong with me? You know, and it's so hard to look after yourself when you're trying to manage all that.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because in fact, the first ever podcast we did, the audio one of my clients, Fozia, and she won't mind me mentioning her because she's incredible, but she opened up about what she went through. And one of the things that she said to me was, in our communities, you don't just divorce the other person, you divorce the whole Khandan, which means you divorce, like you said, all the aunties and uncles. Our communities don't accept that a couple have gone their separate ways and ended their relationship. They then the auntie ends the relationship, the uncle ends, everybody. So that's a lot of pressure on someone, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it makes it not okay.
Yeah.
It makes their decision, or it makes that person feel that the decision's not okay. So there's that kind of not feeling.
And guilt, like you mentioned.
Yeah, guilt, shame, not being accepted, not being able to talk about it because so-and-so didn't like it, or so-and-so, you know, auntie so-and-so is not going to be happy. And it's such a shame because, you know, Islamically it's accepted.
Absolutely.
You know, it is a clause. We can have that, you know, get out if needed.
Well, Islam was one of the first religions to give people the ability to divorce.
Absolutely. But culturally, we don't give each other that space. We don't give each other the respect as adults, you know. And I don't think we do it intentionally. I think, again, it's generational. It's what's happened for so many years, and it's come from kind of insular communities where this is what we do. We've always done this. So it's hard to break away from that, you know. But I think as generations are developing and growing, and we're getting these new generations, we are moving away from that.
Yeah.
We are moving to autonomy, and this is my decision, and this is. But we've still got them pockets and big pockets of people where, you know, they are going to face backlash.
Yeah.
You know, so that's where therapy for them is important, because they've got that space, regardless of what's going on out there, to come to speak to someone and feel fully validated, fully heard, and held, regardless of what they're going through, what they've done. You know, so they can start to accept that decision and accept themselves.
Yeah.
And you know, your job as a therapist is to build that person back up. You know, undoubtedly, a breakdown of any relationship, especially a marriage, is hard, it's difficult. And you know, divorces don't always end nicely. You know,
not commonly.
Some of the things you know, we've spoke about the last time we talked, you know, it sounds difficult.
Yeah.
You know, the added things that people have to go through. So having somewhere to go, someone who understands that and can see that it's not just, you know, it's not just an end of a marriage, it's the ending of, it's a bereavement.
Yeah.
You know, how do you manage that?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to manage that?
Yeah.
And it's having that space to manage that and to go through and have your feelings accepted.
And acknowledge
it's okay.
That it's not a failure.
Yeah.
It's just the next part of your life. And that's something that comes as a recurring theme for us, in that clients really feel that they have failed at something, but, we've spoken to, people have gone through that process and come out the other end and gone on to even excel after separation divorce. So it's about dispelling that myth. I want to ask you, Ayesha, about the common themes that you see in clients who come to you for therapy in terms of our community. And I'm thinking about things like intergenerational living, like our parents, it was, a given that you would live with your in-laws or your grandparents for many years to come. But how are young people coping with that now? How are they coping with, like, you touched upon it earlier, about parental conflict, about marriage, and I want to say arranged marriage. I don't want to say forced marriage, but where it's expected of them. So it's not physically or spoken out loud that this is a forced marriage, but it's expected that they will marry so and so from the family. Religion. I see a lot of young people fighting with the whole concept of the rules around religion and living in a society that they're not there per se, but if you're a Muslim, then there's certain expectations on you. Are these kind of things that are people coming to you they want to openly discuss them without feeling judged?
Yeah, I think these are some of the conflicts that we see, especially when I'm working with young people. Religion is a big one because they're expressing, they're developing, they're going to be experimenting,
questioning.
Yeah. And then, they're coming against social media and what they're seeing on there and what life should be like as opposed to what life they're living. And then they're in conflict with, rules and regulations of religion and culture. And it becomes really difficult for them to express or explore, because they're told by the parents they shouldn't be doing this, and as a Muslim you should be doing that. So there's no space for that exploration. There's no space for mistakes. So what happens? They go underground. They'll start doing things that, like drug use to kind of experiment, and that puts them at risk because there's no backup plan. Then there's no, Mom, Dad, I've done this. I need help. Whereas
if it goes wrong, who do they speak to then?
Exactly. Whereas some of my white friends who have got kids, they because it's more kind of acceptable, they've got safety plans in place. Right, he's my son's going here, he's going there, he's going to a festival. Right, he knows that he can ring me at this time. So they've got safety plans because it's more accepted in that culture. At 16, 17, they're going to start drinking, they're going to start going clubbing or whatever, it's more accepted, whereas in our culture the kids are still faced with the same needs and desires, but there's boundaries, there's big heavy boundaries. If you don't do this, even religiously, I remember growing up, had aunties and uncles saying, well, if you don't do this, you're going to go to hell. Whereas teaching with love and kindness and openness and giving someone options means that they're less likely to take risk, and they're more likely to come to you when they're in trouble or when they're curious.
Absolutely, and that's really important. And I think shutting down the questioning. I find that a lot of people who've got children will be like, well, they're questioning Islam, they're asking me questions which I don't know the answer to. How do I answer that question? And because I think the older generation were taught, it was blind faith, wasn't it? You accept it. It's the word of God. Like it or not, if you don't want to go to hell, you will follow it.
Exactly.
And these young people are like saying, well, why do we do that? And there is probably, and there is an explanation for these things, but parents are not allowing that safe space, like you say, for communication, for discussion, to open up that whole world of questioning, so I understand why I'm doing certain things.
Absolutely, and I think it's important for them to have an understanding of why you're doing something. And I think that's something with my faith and spirituality, is because I had the space to ask. I could ask my parents, like, well, why do we do that for? Why do we need to pray 5 times? Why do we need to do this? And there was never any, if you don't do this, if you don't do, there was always love. There was always acceptance around, you're going to make mistakes, but it's okay. We're here. God's not going anywhere.
No, that's fantastic.
God knows we're fallible. We're humans, we're going to make mistakes, but you just, you learn from the mistakes and you reset and you reset. And I think having that for younger generations is really important.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to navigate, being in, trying to manage a multicultural community and a society, and we're part of two different cultures,
and so contrasting cultures as well.
Absolutely,
right? There's not even like. So Ayesha, so my final questions for you are: where do you cover in terms of areas geographically? Are you accessible everywhere?
Yeah, I'm pretty accessible because I can work online.
Okay.
I can do phone calls. I have some clients that prefer phone calls, and then I have clients that prefer face to face, and online as well. So
okay, great. And is it expensive? Because a lot of clients will say to me when I feel that they could benefit from it, they'll be like, "Oh, it sounds expensive to me," and just not consider it. So, what would you say?
I think it's quite affordable. I don't think it's expensive, and I think if you break it down in terms of like you'd go for a meal, you won't worry about spending £30-40 on a meal.
Very true.
Once a month, or it's about prioritising another part of your well-being and not seeing it as seeing it as something that you need to have.
I like what you said earlier. It's like it should be as normal as going for a spa, because people realise that for their well-being they need that calm space. They need to bring down the stresses of everyday life. I think therapy should be an extension of that, and I really hope we move in that direction. So on a final note, what would your advice be to anyone who's listening who identifies with some of the things that you've talked about in terms of how they're feeling, but they're just waiting or don't know how to make that first step? What would you say to them?
I'd say, be brave and take that step. There's lots of therapists out there. There's lots of support out there. Be brave and take that step, because it is scary. Having gone through that process myself, it's very scary. But the benefits of it and the kind of the support that you can get and the feeling you can get from being able to talk and express and just have that support, it definitely outweighs any kind of apprehension about, should I be doing it? Is it going to be expensive? I think just to take that step.
That first step.
Be brave.
Have you got an example of a success story that maybe someone who's listening might identify with, to say, wow, because I normally find that when you give examples of, well, I had a client and this is how they felt and she went through this and helped through that and this is what she's doing now, it's sort of like a little bit of like a light bulb moment for people.
Yeah, I've got a few. I think one was quite prominent. It was a male client from the Pakistani community, and he was struggling with depression and anxiety, and also a breakdown of marriage.
Okay.
So his marriage had just broken down, and he was just feeling like a failure. He was feeling really low. He was just really, really struggling, and couldn't understand why he couldn't just snap out of it. Why can't I just get up? Why can't I just get up for work? So because of that, his work was struggling. He weren't getting the work in because he wasn't able to show up. Yeah. His resources were so depleted. But there was a lot of self-blame for this breakdown of marriage.
Okay.
Because I'm the man, I should have done this, I should have done that. And so, and I felt I could see that this kind of self-deprecating behaviour, this blaming himself, and I wanted to unpick that more. I wanted to see, where's this coming from?
Yeah.
Where's it come from? Is it validated? Is it, has he done something? And we unpicked it and we talked about that. And he was really sad about this breakdown. But actually, when we unpicked it, he was in an abusive relationship.
Okay, yeah.
He was being financially abused, he was emotionally abused, but he didn't see it because he was so dependent on that relationship. And that partner, had literally taken, financially from him and emotionally. But because he was so dependent on that relationship and it made him feel validated, when it broke down, his brothers are successful and they've got successful marriages, happy marriages. So he was comparing them, and they were saying, what have you done? It's you. He didn't have that external support. You need to try. You can't just divorce. It's not good. What are the family going to say? So he was just so conflicted, and it made him just go into like a deep, dark hole of depression and anxiety.
That's a lot of different external pressures on him.
He had so much. I mean, I remember thinking at one point, like, where do I start?
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, why am I worried about where I start? I need to ask him where he wants to start.
Yeah.
What's important to him? What does he want to look at first? Yeah. And I think he was in conflict because he said, I can't face God. And I knew his faith was really strong, but he said, I can't even pray right now. And I said,
because of the failure of the marriage?
The failure of the marriage, the depression, not being able to get out of bed, not eating properly. He didn't even have the energy to get out, to pray.
Yeah.
And he felt guilt because...
more guilt.
Yeah. So, I said to him, look, God understands, God can see what you're going through, and God does not want you to feel guilty or shame, because you're not in a good place right now. Yeah. So I made him realise that what he's doing is enough. Right now, little steps just to get up, to have something to eat, just little steps, because his basic needs weren't even being managed. Yeah. So once we established that
and to acknowledge that he needs help, I mean, that's a big step, isn't it? To acknowledge
really
the
difficult.
problem.
Yeah. He was actually referred from a friend who was really concerned, really worried, and actually offered and did pay for the therapy. Yeah. And it worked out really well. It worked out really well because that person had some amazing inner resources, some amazing qualities, but just couldn't see them because of the rejection of the marriage and the failure of that. But through kind of that validation, through that recognition of that person's value, that person's strengths, and that person's own resilience, and building that up and building that self-esteem up, just gave that person the ability to look at themselves in the mirror again and see, oh, actually, you're right, I can do this, I can do this. And it took time, it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. Yeah. Because first it's hard to get that person to acknowledge what's going on for them, because there's so much fog. It's misty and it's foggy and it's dark. So to pull someone out of that slowly,
it's a lot,
and they've got to want to do that. And depression can make things really hard and burdensome. It feels comfortable sometimes being in that depression because that becomes your identity.
Gosh, yeah.
And that became and it did become that person's identity. Yeah. Oh, it's fine because this is how I feel, and it made him feel safe. And so, trying to help that person recognise who they are, and who they were before this stuff happened, and pulling that back. I think that's a really good example of so many different things. So the religious, the cultural, the expectations of the marriage, the family expectations, and that person's doing amazingly, really successful, doing really, really well. And I was worried at the beginning. Yeah. What are we going to do?
That's a lot, isn't it?
This is a lot. Yeah. And you do, as a human being, no matter how much training you've had, how many skills you've had, you do think, am I going to be able to help this person? Am I going to be able to make a difference? You do, because you don't want to do a disservice to someone. You don't want to, put them in a position that may be worse. But I think from that learning for myself as well is that, even if just the basic thing is just sitting there and listening to someone, so they're not alone and they're seen. Yeah. And that's all you can do without any techniques or any therapeutic techniques or whatever you've learned, that's enough.
I think you made a really important point, which I've seen in some of my clients, is reminding them who they were. Yeah. That's so important. So if nothing else, getting them back to remember or reminding them, like you said, who they once were is so, I think for me, a moment in that where they think, hang on, that was me. I was this kind of person, and this is not me anymore. Yeah. And working back towards that person, because they can. It's not like you're presenting them with a scenario in that I'm going to turn you into this other person that's amazing in this. You were once amazing. You are still amazing. And we can help you get there, or I can, give you the tools and resources like we've been saying, to get you back to that person. So I just think that's a fantastic story to end on. And I said to you at the beginning of the interview, I could talk to you all day. But honestly, thank you for your amazing work for the community and beyond.
Thank you.
No, honestly, it's such a great service that you provide the community, and coming from a place where you had actually gone through something similar. I think it's so compelling, and it just gives some real value and weight to the work that you're doing. So thank you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been absolutely amazing.
It's been great. I feel like I've had a therapy session today. I feel quite empowered after this.
It's really lovely talking about it, actually. Remembering what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Absolutely. It's true, and that's what we need to shed light on the work that people are doing and helping others.
Absolutely.
And this is what these sort of videos are all about. But thank you for that. And if you need details of Ayesha, then drop us a line and we will put you in contact with Ayesha and the work she does. But till next time.